Daily Detroit is brought to you by the community. Support our work at patreon.com/dailydetroit.
The city of Detroit has been watched closely by those interested and involved in the cannabis industry. Due to the city's size and its voters' overwhelming approval of recreational marijuana, almost 70% of residents were behind it back in 2018. The Motor City will almost assuredly become the hub of recreational weed in Michigan. But the city has taken a while to draw up local rules, getting a proposed ordinance together just this week. So what's on the table? And how does it aim to ensure Detroiters, many of whom were prosecuted through the war on drugs, have a shot at the financial benefits? My guest to dive in on this is Detroit City Councilman James Tate. He represents District 1 on Detroit's west side. That's north of I-96 and kind of bisected by Grand River. And he's been the lead on this citywide project. After that, I'll share a couple quick things to know today. I'm Jer Stays. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to episode 622 of your Daily Detroit for October 28th, 2020. Detroit City Councilman James Tate, District 1. Welcome back to Daily Detroit, sir.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's dive in on this proposed marijuana ordinance. Some people give you some arrows for taking a while on this one, but looking at the materials, it's a lot more developed than some of the other ordinances I've seen rolled out statewide. What was the thought behind taking the time with this?
Well, it was very easy for us to just, flip the switch on recreational marijuana in the city of Detroit. But what was most important, in addition to just flipping the switch, was to make sure that we provided an opportunity for Detroiters to have a fair chance to succeed in the industry in the city of Detroit. When we look at where we are right now with medical marijuana facilities, we only have, and we're just going by what we're deeming Detroiters, there's 45 of them that are currently open and operating in the city of Detroit, and very few of them are Detroiters. Now, of course, we don't want to use race, and that's certainly not where I want to go. When you look at a city of Detroit that is 80+% African American, to only have 4 or 5, and it depends on where they are this week, 4 or 5 African-American businesses in this industry in the city of Detroit just seemed out of whack. So what we wanted to do and focused on, again, not race-based, but city-based. We want to make sure that individuals inside of the city, in the city of Detroit, again, which has struggled through the war on drugs that ravaged our city in the 80s and 90s. And now we have individuals who are making pretty good living off of the same plant that incarcerated many families and transformed negatively their stability. It was important for me to try to identify how do we collectively as a group, a team, a city, put more focus on not just opening up facilities, but providing equity in the industry so it provides a fair shot for Detroiters to be able to get into the industry and actually succeed. Right now, when you look at it, Detroiters, overwhelmingly, they have them as the security outside or, janitorial cleaning up. But when we talk about ownership, that's when you have a chance to have generational wealth. And the goal should always be, how do we improve the lives of residents in the city? That goes far beyond just being a consumer. Having ownership, having a real stake in the business, it creates an opportunity to have transformation, not just for that family, but the city overall, because we are, as a city, a multitude of small families that create what we call the city of Detroit. I love this place. Don't want to go anywhere else. And we've got to make sure that we have the opportunity for every industry that we can, especially a brand new industry, essentially. We've got to make sure that we provide the best opportunity in the city of Detroit for those who live here. And definitely those who stuck out that process of, war on drugs. Just say no, right?
Well, especially considering how overwhelmingly Detroit voters supported this, marijuana in the city. I feel like people looked at it and went, not only is it something that people want to consume, but it's an industry that, frankly, there's a lot of people with a lot of knowledge within the city.
Yeah, very much a lot of knowledge. Now, I'll tell you, one of the challenges that we often confronted in the ordinance is, balancing the desires of all different quote unquote stakeholders. So you have, people who are in the industry. they have certain desires and goals. You have those who are trying to get into the industry but have been frozen out in some kind of way, whether it's through lack of resources or maybe lack of connection. And then you have general residents who also have many different classes as well. But I'll just say general residents who may be supportive of cannabis, but they just don't want it in their backyard. And then you have those, of course, who just don't want cannabis to be sold. They think it's, the evil drug, whatever. All those negative things that we've heard in the past, that mindset is still there with a certain population of individuals, even though overwhelmingly the voters went to the polls and voted for recreational marijuana. We've got to balance all those. And like I said, we've had about 20 different versions of this ordinance, and I think we've got some things in there that are going to make each class of those individuals that I just mentioned, some of them, they're going to like some of the items, and they're probably not going to like other things. And that's unfortunately the nature of legislation and human nature.
A lot of people have been looking at the city because it's going to be a hub of the industry with the expected number of licenses. How many licenses are we talking about? And how many license types? One of the things I saw was that it isn't just about, say, a shop, but there's so much more to this.
Yeah, there's a lot. There are 10 license types that are available. And the one that gets the most attention, of course, is the what's typically called a provisioning center or a dispensary. That's where you sell retail marijuana-related or cannabis-related products, whether it's the flower or some other type of product that's derived from the plant. But you also have, grower. That's a license. And that is the person who grows. You have the processor. Those are the ones who actually transform the flower into gummies or some other type of edible, or some other type of form of cannabis for consumption. You also have the secured transporter. These are the folks who transport the cannabis from one location to the next, and you've got to get a license for that as well. We're not talking about small amounts. We're talking about moving from one major facility to the next. Then you have the safety compliance facility. That's where the cannabis is taken. And what they do is they do testing to make sure that there's no harmful materials in it, pesticides, heavy metals, things of those natures. And that has to be, that is one requirement that the state made, which I'm glad that they did, to ensure that the harmful elements that in some of the cannabis that we've seen around the country does not infiltrate its way in here. Then you also have the designated consumption lounge, and that's the place where, pretty self-explanatory, that's where you can consume your cannabis. One of the challenges that we found in many places that has recreational marijuana is that you will have, let's say, tourists. They'll come into town and they want to consume cannabis. So they'll go out and go to a retail location, and then they have nowhere to consume. So they go and they may consume in a car, or they may go and consume in a park or some other public place. Well, we wanted to combat that and provide an opportunity for individuals to do so in a safe environment that is definitely controlled, and someone can identify if maybe you've had too much for you to drive right now. We need to monitor that, and so that we're looking at ahead.
There's so many aspects, because you're right. People think about the distribution place, but you've got all of these things that are, frankly, not just important to the industry, but opportunities for Detroiters and for business.
Absolutely. The micro business is the one that's the least expensive, but for some, it also provides some of the largest risk. Micro business is vertically integrated. You have to do everything from top to bottom at that facility. So you grow, you process, and you can participate in retail at that particular location. You can't purchase from anywhere else. You can only do your business at that location. Rounding out the last two, we have a marijuana event organizer, and that is someone who you would contract to create an event at a particular location that has cannabis being consumed, potentially at a designated consumption lounge or some other location. And then you have a temporary marijuana event license. And that, again, similar to where you see beer gardens and some other type of gatherings where individuals are able to consume a certain product. This allows for that same concept, but only for cannabis-related products. So I'm excited about it. We also have we made sure that we had caps, because remember I told you about there are people who, though they support it, they also have kind of a NIMBY idea, not in my backyard. So we put caps on some of these licenses. They're more competitive, and the licenses that we believe may, if they are not capped, that they will be oversaturated. And of course, the top one is that retail establishment that we talked about that everyone sees and knows about. And we put a cap on that at 75 licenses. Designated consumption lounges, we put a cap of 35 of those licenses. And micro businesses, we put a cap of 35 on those as well. And I'm certainly not saying that we're going to stay at those numbers forever, but I think this is a sweet spot, so to speak, where it's safe to venture out and identify, and we can grow from there. Identify if this is the place that we want to be, and then grow from.
Those categories you mentioned, a good number of them have that Detroit legacy component. What was your thinking behind those that do and those that do not? I mean, it seems there might be a difference in demand for how technical they are. Think about something like safety compliance facilities. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, so it is very all of these are really technical. I mean, when you start talking about a retail establishment, in a highly regulated industry, you one slip up can cost you your entire business when it comes to the federal government and others. So all of these have to have, eagle eye inspection and that type of care that's taken as a business owner. But you're absolutely correct. When we start talking about safety compliance facility, you can teach someone really quickly how to do certain things. Being someone who knows how to test products, maybe not so much. But again, based upon the type of training that's out there, it may be easier than I believe. I just know that there has not been a huge demand, not just here in the city of Detroit, but elsewhere, for safety compliance facilities. So something like that just wouldn't make sense for us to try to put any bounds on it, because we want things to flourish. We want these licenses to be utilized in a proper way. Our goal is not to suppress, but our goal is to open up and make sure that we provide opportunity for anyone, whether you live in the city or outside of the city. If you have a goal, a dream to be a successful entrepreneur in the cannabis business, we welcome you. But we also, just as importantly, and I would say for me, more importantly, I'm interested in ensuring that Detroiters have an opportunity to thrive in the industry that is located in the city that they live in. And that's important.
So let's talk about those legacy Detroiters and kind of how you define that, because this is new ground. I think, I'm familiar with those 51% resident requirements for constructing projects and things like that we've seen over the years. Could you walk through what a legacy Detroiter means?
Being a legacy Detroiter absolutely has its perks. Being a legacy Detroiter provides an opportunity to get, again, a minimum. We made sure that no less than 50% of all license types will go towards legacy Detroiters. But we also made sure, because we knew that the cost for these licenses are pretty expensive, and not because we want it to be, but this is just the industry standard. And we cannot charge as a municipality more in actuality than it costs to conduct the service. But when you look at the sheer number, that price can go up. So we're looking at potentially $5,000, which is not uncommon. But Detroiters will pay 1% of all of the licenses types that are available. So that's one of the benefits that we made for legacy Detroiters. Legacy Detroiters also will have an opportunity to be provided the chance to purchase city-owned land at a 25% fair market value. That's huge. Many of the entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry talk about the fact that buying land, finding land, purchasing land is one of the most difficult aspects of it. Because once let's say you find the property, you go to the person who owns it. Once they realize that it's in a zone, in an area that's zoned for cannabis, then that price gets jacked up like 5-6 times. So we've seen that over and over again. So we wanted to address that issue as well. We're still working on identifying partners that will assist with the financial challenges that are out there, whether through a grant or a loan, because we know the startup cost for this industry is immense and tremendous. So we're working on that. Haven't gotten all the way through there yet, but we're in the talks with private lenders and folks in philanthropy and we certainly have their ear. But let me talk just a little bit about what a legacy Detroiter is. A legacy Detroiter, we got three ways to be determined a legacy Detroiter. And all of these, you have to have lived in the city of Detroit for at least a year prior to you applying. So lived in the city of Detroit for 15 of the last 30 years and be a resident of the city of Detroit for at least a year prior to application. That's one way. The second way is lived in the city of Detroit for 13 years of the last 30 years and you're low income as defined by the federal government. You still have to have lived in the city of Detroit for at least a year prior to applying. And then the third leg, and we know how, again, the war on drugs, it ravaged families. We have to make sure that there was some element in there for those who have been previously convicted of marijuana convictions. And someone who falls in that category, you must have lived in the city of Detroit for 10 of the last 30 years. But again, that last commitment, a requirement rather, is that you have to have lived in the city of Detroit for at least a year prior to your application.
Obviously, this isn't a done deal yet. This is an announcement, and anyone who follows the city knows that over time, things go into council, they get shifted around, that kind of stuff. What are the next steps, and what's the timeline you're aiming for with this?
Yeah, so we are in the process right now, going through the city council approval process. I'm hopeful that my colleagues are going to support this. I've heard overwhelming support, but of course there's some, always questions that have to be addressed. And, most of them have just seen this document as of Friday last week. So giving them an opportunity to go over the number of pages that we have here. But we are, it's now within the process of the committee, Public Health and Safety, and they're going to be having a discussion on this ordinance on November 2nd. We are as City Council, we go on winter recess November 24th. And it is my goal to have this ordinance approved by that time, because the longer we wait, the longer it will take for us to actually enter into the industry, because we still have to get, make sure that we have the capacity from an internal side to ensure that we can handle the sheer numbers of individuals that are going to be applying. And so we're telling folks, once this passes, we want you to go to our Civil Rights Inclusion and Opportunity Office, also known as CREO, to get certified. If you're a legacy Detroiter, if you believe you qualify as a legacy Detroiter, run down there, call down there, email them after this gets approved, because that's when we will begin certifying legacy Detroiters. There are three different cycles of application review. The first is for legacy Detroiters. The second is for those who currently have open medical marijuana facilities. And the third is for those general applicants who don't fall into either one of those two categories. So if the timeline that we put in place actually goes through with no major adjustments for my colleagues, we can see licenses be issued in July of 2021.
Councilman James Tate, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you walking listeners through this proposal and what you're looking to do. And thanks so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Look forward to the next one. And I would love to come back on, because I know we're not done yet. We have a long way in this conversation and quote unquote fight with cannabis, but I think we're on the right track.
All right, here are a couple things to know today.
We started hearing stories that said, we got a bunch of positions that aren't filled. People aren't getting out in the street. The Census Bureau wouldn't disclose any of this to us. They wouldn't tell us how many enumerators were there. They wouldn't tell us how many houses they'd gotten to. But here's what we did know. The publicly reported information, which is called the self-count, went up faster in every city in America during the non-response follow-up than it did in the city of Detroit. Cleveland was well behind us when the non-response follow-up started. Cleveland went way past us, which suggests that there were people in the streets working in these other cities in a far more diligent way than they were in the city of Detroit.
That's Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan at a press conference Wednesday. He appeared with U.S. Representative Rashida Tlaib, announcing that they're looking for evidence the city of Detroit was intentionally undercounted by the U.S. Census Bureau. The census process isn't supposed to be partisan, but it often is in the crosshairs of politicians. That's because the numbers that come out of the census determine where dollars get spent by government and businesses, not to mention representation in state and national legislatures. Tlaib is also looking into whether congressional oversight is necessary. If you were a census worker with information one way or another on this, both Duggan and Tlaib provided a phone line and email address, 866-20-COUNT or info@20count.com. My guess is that this is going to be a story we'll be following up on later. A small format Meijer-owned specialty grocery store is starting construction Thursday on Detroit's Near East Side. Rivertown Market on Jefferson Avenue in the Lafayette Park neighborhood will create about 60 jobs when it's done in a little over a year. When this project was announced a couple years ago, it was going to be an apartment development as well with a couple hundred units, but those plans were scrapped. The $16 million 2.2-acre project will also have 100 parking spaces. It received a number of tax incentives as well. I'll add a quick note to respond to comments we've gotten about this development, as we've talked about it before, been kind of following it. And I'll just tell you, it is not a grocery store desert over there. Both Lafayette Foods and Harbortown Market are nearby, but they're just not chains. If there's one of the things that I thought I knew, but over time learned differently doing this, it's that Metro Detroit has a real love of chains, like a passion for them. It's almost as if it's not a chain, it doesn't exist to some folks, which just kind of blows my mind. Anyway, to me, it's fun to explore the parts of the region that I cannot get anywhere else. If you want to dip your toe into that for grocery stores, try Honeybee La Colmena in Southwest Detroit. Been shopping there for years. Super tasty. And if you have a favorite place, email us at dailydetroit@gmail.com. I, for one, would love to know about it. And that's it for today's Daily Detroit. I'm Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening. Take care of each other, and I'll see you around Detroit. Talk tomorrow.